Well, this is the video I never really planned to make. So I did a video last summer, which is E10 fuel safe for our vehicles, for our classic vehicles and for fuel lines and stuff. Now this pipe I put on there, crikey, it must be about, I'm guessing about 6-7 years ago. And these lines here are connected to the master cylinder and brake cylinder, actually the oil feed. So they've got oil in them. And this, when I bought this, was supposed to be fuel and oil safe piping. I'll have a look at what grade it is when we take it off and I can see the writing a bit better. But they are nice and flexible. No problem at all. Now over here, underneath the fuel pump, are my fuel lines. They are rock solid. There's no flex in them at all. I can't squeeze them. They're squishy. You can squeeze them, no problem at all. There's absolutely nothing. They've totally degraded. And God knows how close to being a problem that is in a serious way. So today I'm going to be replacing the fuel lines. It's something I planned to do last year, maybe a year before in fact. Never got around to it, but now I've seen how bad these are, definitely needs doing. So I've just unhooked the fuel line off the pump. Look at that, I can't even straighten it. Absolutely crazy crackers. I wonder if it'll snap. No, I think it's going to snap, but that is, it is not a flexible rubber pipe anymore, let's put it that way. So this is my first venture into stainless steel braided Teflon hosing, which looks a little bit like that, and the compression fittings that you have to use to basically attach it. Now you can't really clamp down the Teflon hosing. Basically the inner liner is a very thin liner. It's not like pipe, it's not like a fuel hose as such, it's quite thin. Apart from the fact you can't really clamp down Teflon or PTFE because it's so slippy. I suspect if you were to clamp it down with jubilees and stuff, it either slip off or it just damage and split. It's just quite thin, it's not really made for that. So you have to use the correct fittings. Now, I kind of thought it'd be easy to do. I didn't think it'd be a big issue. I thought, go online, all the parts I need, it's pretty obvious what you need to order, fit them into the car, jobs are good. And a week later, I'm still doing the fuel system. So it's not been quite as straightforward. And I'm going to try to explain what fittings I've used on my car, simply because it took such a lot of figuring out for me to figure out what I needed to use and buy. I'm also going to do a second video which will be how to actually attach these onto the Teflon hosing. Again, lots of videos out there how to do it. They'll make it look pretty easy, and it's not always quite so easy. So yeah, so I'll show you how it's done, and I'll show you a couple of pitfalls of what can go wrong, basically, what to do to rectify it. So starting with the tank, we have the outlet. Now this was actually converted a few years ago, so it actually goes to an 8mm copper outlet, and that attached to my 8mm rubber piping originally. To attach to a copper hardline, you have to buy a hardline compression fitting, which is what this section here is. So this has a little olive on it, a bit like a domestic copper piping if you've done plumbing and stuff. It's very similar. You have a little olive in there, which when you tighten it down, it compresses and crushes onto the actual the copper pipe to hold it tight. And then on the end of there is another one of these, one of the straight fittings, so a straight AN6 fitting. This part is male, so there's a male thread that comes out, and you attach the female straight onto the end of it. If you didn't want to convert your tank to 8mm outlet like this, if that's what you're looking at, there is another option, which is a tank fitting. Now you'd have to drill a hole in your tank and block off the original one. It goes through the hole, and then you have to get a nut on the inside and the nylon washer to stop it from leaking. And I figured trying to fit that through the tank inlet would be an absolute nightmare. Plus I didn't want to start drilling tanks and stuff, so I sent it back and stuck with this option. But there's an option to do that if you want to do that, and then the outlet from your tank will just then go to a straight fitting, or if you wanted to get a 90-degree bend one or something, so you just basically attach onto it. So if we follow the new line, which will be cut down eventually, that goes to my fuel pump. So if you have a modern rotary fuel pump bit like this one, they tend to come with AN fittings on the end, and they basically go into the thread that's on the pump itself, and it gives you a little male that comes out. Now I tried to connect directly to the fuel pump. It took a long time, and my father's help, to try and figure out what the thread in there was, and basically I couldn't find anything to connect direct to it. So don't try, just run with what the pump comes with. So attached to the original blue conversion part there, that comes out as a male, and again you just put a straight AN6 female ended onto the end of it, screwed straight on. So on the other side of the fuel pump we have another straight fitting that goes on just the same. However, when I first had this pump on the fuel lines, on the rubber lines, there was a barb on the end of here. So basically that barb fitting I totally removed. So again, the adapter that came with the pump, and then another straight AN. So we move on to my fuel filter. Now I've relocated it under here. Basically it used to be the back of the engine, at the side of the engine, and it was really hard to access where it was, because I wanted it away from the heat of the engine basically. So I've moved it here just so I can get to it in future, and it was easier to plumb it in here than actually do anything back there basically. So the fittings, the fuel filter when you buy it, there's the option of buying it with or without the fittings, so I just bought it with. It was a few quid more. It's not worth messing trying to find the threads and all the stuff like that. So these fittings here came with the fuel filter, so they just went straight in, and then they came with an AN6 outlet, which again another straight fitting has gone on to the end of there, and the exit is exactly the same. So AN adapter which came with the fuel filter straight to an AN6 straight female. So the next bit was really frustrating because I actually ran my original rubber hoses through the tunnel. So they actually go into the tunnel here at the side, the front the side of the frame head. So these went in there, and it literally took days of fighting to get the old ones out, and even worse, run these new ones through the tunnel and through the holes at an angle like this. The Teflon's really not that flexible, so trying to turn around any corners and poke things through holes is just crazy hard. I say I fought with it for a couple of days by myself, and I just couldn't do it. Created hooks and loops and push rods and all sorts to try and do it, but it was just impossible because the only access you've got to do it is basically at the front through the little access hole. So if you're going to be running your fuel lines, I probably wouldn't recommend this solution, just because it was such a fight to do. So I'd probably run hard lines under the car or something, or if you're keeping your original 6mm fuel hub pipe, then that's fine. You'll have something quite easy to attach to. Inside the back of the car, things got no less complicated. So if you've seen my videos in the past, you'll know I've got the radiator in the back here, which goes where the back seat used to be. It actually covers the centre of the tunnel. Here would have been the big pipe, which is here at the minute, which goes to the flame box for the intercooler. So all that to come out, and then the fuel lines actually come out of my side of my tunnel, feed and return, and go up towards the engine up there. Now getting these fuel lines in here through two holes you can't see because the radiator's in the way, absolute nightmare. Even with two of us it was an absolute fight, it really was. So if you have any kind of solution even close to what I've got, I wouldn't recommend running your fuel pipes in that way, if you don't have access to get to the side of the tunnel and stuff. So it was almost an impossibility. So those fuel lines went up the side of the car, up the side of the gearbox to the above the inner wings, and there was a fuel filter there which I've moved. I've already shown you the fuel filter, and they now fire straight to the back of the car, into the engine bay and attached to what's left of the firewall. So in the engine bay, we have what's left of my firewall here. Initially I actually bought fittings which bolted onto the firewall, and you basically put a female at each side of it. So you had a male attachment on the firewall which fired the male forwards and male backwards, and then you put a female straight on each side of it. Apart from the fact that it was quite costly to do that, you need quite a lot of space to work on these to tighten them up and actually get a spanner in, and the access in there is almost impossible. So they went back and replaced with the bits, and in the end we just chose to basically fire the line straight through there, so there's no junk, there's no connectors, there's no risks of leak anyway, and they go through grommets on the firewall, so nothing rubs, and they go straight onto the hard lines of my Subaru engine. So the fuel rail on my engine is 8mm steel, and at the end of there, underneath here, is a bulb. So rather than being barbed, it's got a bulb on there which helps keep the original fuel lines in place when it's clamped down. Now you can't readily, as far as I can tell, attach to a bulb using the AN fittings. So one option is to cut that bulb off, but I found that the amount of steel that it would leave behind afterwards would make it really tricky to use one of the compression fittings like I did in the fuel tank, to actually get spank tools in there or even attach it on. So it wasn't really an option. So in the end, went for a bit of fuel hose, original fuel hose I'm using. It's lasted a long time, so it'll be fine, and it's easy to replace. I've actually got some R9 to replace this with now, actually, but when I get around to it, I'll do that. So these fittings are basically AN6 onto the fuel line, and the other half of this is a barb. So basically we have a bulb to a bit of pipe to a barb to the fitting, which you buy as all as one, and then to the fuel line. Complicated. Lastly, we have our fuel return, which comes up the side of the tank, and I've not actually done it yet because we've got to attach put the tank back in. I will chop this down and we'll attach this to the return on my tank. Obviously most bug guides won't need this because they won't have fuel injection, but when you have fuel injection you have a return line to the tank. So the tank return is a little bit complicated. I'm actually using the breather, which goes to originally had the rubber hose in it, which goes to the side of the fuel filler. I've used that as a return. Now when I had the rubber lines on, I bought this compression fitting which attached directly to the now outlet or inlet on the tank, and that was on a barb, which meant the rubber hose is attached to. But I couldn't find a way of basically getting the AN fitting straight to the tank, so I kept the compression fitting. I can't remember what the thread was now, unfortunately, but just make a note of whatever the thread is that's on it. Then I had to buy an adapter, so I've got the adapter for the adapter, which came from Demon Twigs, and that was about 20 quid, so quite expensive for what it is. But that goes to an AN fitting, and then we attach the AN straight female on the end, which will go to the fuel line. That's looking better, all undersealed. Now I know a lot of people don't like underseal. It can cause problems when you come to paint or weld in the future and stuff like that, and also if it starts to flake you can actually trap water behind and actually promote rusting in places, so you have to be careful and keep an eye on it, make sure it's in good condition. But I've used a decent quality one. It's actually one I used years ago. I bought it, crikey, decades ago now. And the pot's the same pot I had all that time ago, and opened it up and it's just as fresh today as it was then, so it's gone on, and it's actually been on this car in places for a lot of that time, so it seems to have held up pretty well. I wouldn't recommend, however, Poundland Special Underseal. I just wouldn't. Let's leave it at that. But yeah, without stripping it all down, taking all the stuff out here, cleaning it back to metal, and yeah, to do all that and then to epoxy paint it would have been a massive job, and quite frankly I feel like I've missed half of some already, so this will do for now.